So hello and welcome. We're coming to you from Amiskwachee, Wasaga, sometimes known as Edmonton, Alberta. We are on Treaty 6 territory, traditional lands of First Nations and Métis people, and perhaps particularly note that this area has been a gathering space for listening for thousands of years. Sound and music have been heard, created, celebrated here for thousands of years by many diverse First Nations and cultures. Tonight, we want to humbly and respectfully add our sounds to this history. If you're here for the first time to the Sound Studies Institute, we're a research institute at the University of Alberta that celebrates and supports research into sound from all perspectives, including performative and music understandings of sound, in other words, music, to other human and non-human sounds, and the understandings of the role of sound in our world. I'd like to give a big shout out to the Sound Studies Institute team. Dr. Marilyn Oliver has asked me to step in for her tonight. We have our amazing Tom Merklinger on technical support, and Gail Mandrick, the rock and support of our administrative structure. So our guest tonight is Stephanie Archer. Stephanie is an assistant professor in the Department of Linguistics here at the University of Alberta. She is a developmental psycholinguist,
Yes.
and the director of the Little Magpies Lab for infant language learning. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And you'll probably give a little bit of an introduction to that, or great. So without further ado, I turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Right. So, thank you very much, Tom and Oliver, and I'm very pleased to be here at the Sound Studies Institute to talk about Sounds Online and how I got here. So Sounds Online is a web portal that can house different individual studies. The Sound Studies Institute funded this web portal, and so I'm grateful for this opportunity. The story I'm about to tell you is windy rather, as the roadmap there. So I will start talking about the introduction, which is who I am. I will talk about that in the next couple of slides. My research, I have an infant lab at the Assiniboia Hall, and I will give you a little bit of taste how that looks like the things that we do in our lab. Sound Online and the studies that are in it. I'll discuss the reason for the web portal and how it kind of does work with my research. And further directions. Essentially, I want to have any researchers to join us. So thanks very much. So Sounds, like I said, is a web portal that I've been working on since 2020. As a linguist, I work with humans, and more specifically, vulnerable populations that are infants. In 2020, it was impossible in infants and children in any task in a lab, so obviously due to COVID. And I'm going to bring this up when we discuss my research. Sounds Online was the tipping point to online studies. I had thought about it before, but it was, I was focusing on trying to get my infant lab prepared for families and to visit to the lab. I did not expect COVID at all. So my plan here is using different components of Sounds Online. So we have surveys and quizzes, something like anonymous participants. At the moment, depends on the ethics how we can use it. Something like a BuzzFeed survey that we have. Online studies. These are just studies that we can do online, but we need a little consent for that. And in-person studies, where we would bring people coming into the lab and finding, with anybody who comes in around Edmonton or the area around. So before I continue here, I need some background so we can discuss the portal. So though I hope you enjoy this talk, I am not a coder nor as a tech person, but what I do have is wonderful people working with me. Dr. Anya Arnhold, she is my co-I. She's also on sabbatical. Ida Radu and Lindsay Reiner, they are both coded and been working on the website, and and everything else. They're pretty much what we need to do, right? So I am so grateful for them, and also the Sound Studies Institute for the seed grant funding. So who am I? I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Linguistics. I am a psycholinguist, like Oliver had told me about, or had mentioned, and I'm a developmentalist. My research is things about infant speech perception and also infant-directed speech. Caregiver speech is what we would call it. That would be when you speak to a child. It sounds very different from when you talk to someone who is an adult. I'm also the director of the Little Magpies Lab, and it's in Assiniboine Hall in 150. And we focus on the development of infants' language, usually infants between 6 months to 24 months, and we have several speech tasks. If anyone has a child or knows a child, please send us an email, and because we have fun little tasks there. Okay. So adults rarely think about their language, at least when we think about it in terms of linguistics. Adults typically think about words and meaning, but linguists think more about speech sounds, structures, and storage of linguistic information. But it takes time to learn a language. Adults have difficulty when learning a second language, for example. One reason for this is because we already have a language, and so it can be difficult to have a new one. And also, it depends on the age. However, infants are amazing. We were all infants at one time. Infants in utero, that is around like the last trimester of pregnancy, they already have they've started their journey into being a speaker of a language. And they can memorize auditory stimuli. So in this study that you can see here, the researchers analyzed the cries of 30 French in newborns and 30 German newborns. What you see here is the pitch of each newborn's cry, right? So what do I mean when I say, oh, sorry, I should also mention that we have this pitch for each newborn, and that correlates with the mother's speech patterns. So when I mean speech patterns, we can think about it in terms of English, right? We can have, we can say the word record. We can also say record, right? So these are two different patterns, right? In this case, we have record, which is a noun, and a verb for record, right? So these stress patterns are parallel with the French babies that cry record, right, would be the higher pitch. And the German babies would cry like the record, like record, right? So we would have a high pitch there. And we know this because they were tested only after about 2 to 5 days. So it's quite amazing. From birth, infants can detect the speech sounds across the world's languages. And this is called universal speech perception. So we can learn, as we learn over time, we seek speech input. What speech input is well, all of the people who are talking to and around that child is taking in that information. So that is what the speech input is. Over time, again, we have infants that take in more linguistic information. More specifically, they take in the information from the language that surrounds them. So a really good example of this is the contrast between L and R. So in English, we have our L sounds and we have our R sounds, and we know that these sounds are the words that we use, right? So we have something like rain and lane. We have light and right. We have fly and fright. So we all know that because we've been using with these words all the time. So in English, an infant between 6 to 8 months can hear that contrast. So can the 10 to 12 months and the adults, because we use L's and R's. But in Japanese, there is not any distinction between L and R. Japanese, there is a Japanese sound that sounds like we call it a tap, but it's a word or a sound that sounds like But in Japanese as well, we have 6-month-olds, so they are able to hear the difference. But 10 to 12 months and the adults have no contrast anymore. So this is a timeline in months, and I won't go too deep into it, but in which infants that are able to discriminate different speech sounds. So at around, from 0 to 6, all the babies can detect all the differences in the world's languages. But as we get to around vowels, then we start, as infants, to think like, well, okay, I'm getting my vowels. I know what I should be doing, because this is the sounds that I use or I hear around. Around 8, 9, 10, we have language specific for consonants. So consonants start to become, infants can find these contrasts that are quite robust. So they can see that there's two different speech sounds. So over time, around 11 to 12, we have a decline in foreign languages. However, that also increases in the native language. So and this is why it's so impressive for infant studies. So in the next slide, I want to show you what type of methodologies we use to find how infants tell us what they know. So we have several methodologies, and when we test these, we have several ways that we can think about finding information from the infant. It's one of would be the development stage of the child, the hypothesis that we want to predict, and the methods. These methods are used to find out what infants are doing when they're kind of gathering their information and storing them in their little mind. To do that, we have to exploit normal behaviors. For example, the high amplitude sucking procedure, this is a procedure for newborns to about 4 months of age. The infant sucks on a pacifier, and the pacifier is specifically created so that the baby can we can gather data by sucking on this particular pacifier. And if they're interested with something, they'll start sucking on their pacifier. If they're interested in new things, so they'll suck harder and faster. Over time, so say they're listening to the syllable ba, 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 ba. Over time, the baby's going to be bored. What can be done is that we can stop the ba, 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 and then start again with another syllable, right? So like pa, right? So if the baby is bored with ba, the researcher would now change to pa, and if the baby is not understanding, but if the baby is able to hear the differences, then they will resume their pacifier sucking, right? And that's how you would know that that baby knows, that we know, that they know that they have two different syllables. Eye trackers. These infants use their eyes to determine preferences. Also depends on the task. And we have looking time tasks. This is typically what I do, are these looking time tasks. They are eyes where we can see the baby is looking at something, and then we take that data and we analyze when the baby is interested and when the baby is not interested. So it can be done in a few different ways. And I'm going to give you an example of a very simple one, the sequence preference. infants look to listen. So this is an example of what these what type of study that this would be. So to do this, we need to know that infants look to listen. So, like I said before, we exploit the normal behaviors of infants, and I'll explain what that means. So infants will listen to audio stimulus while they're looking at the visual stimulus. The infant focuses on the visual stimulus because if they want to hear something, right? So when they're listening that they like, they are thinking that they are focusing on the visual stimulus. When they stop caring about when they're hearing something that they don't really care about, then they'll stop looking at the visual stimulus. And this has been something that has been known for probably 60 years now-ish. And so this is how we determine how audio stimulus is different from a different stimulus. So on the next slide, I'm going to show you the booth that is supposed to look like. So the caregiver here, and then there's a baby on the child's lap. And this is an attenuated booth. Okay. Once they get settled, the caregiver has headphones on. That is only so that the infant can not influence the baby. So the baby or the mom would, or parent would probably have music in the headphones. We get to choose what music we have. So in this booth, there is a monitor, and then there's a speaker below, and we have curtains so that the babies don't see what's going on with the tech behind. Because what we want to do is have the baby very bored with everything except for the object that the visual stimulus. Oh, that doesn't work very well. Sorry about that. But we have, so this is what it would look like, right? So this child is quite young, or sorry, is quite older now. Like, I think she drives. But what we see here is this is the infant, and the camera is aiming at the child's face. The child is looking at the monitor. From the camera, there is a mirror there that is just simple stimuli, right? So it's just visual stimuli. There's no movement or anything like that. But when they see that when they're listening to something that they like, they will hear something like baby, 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 baby. And so that would make the baby really happy. Here we have, not only in this scenario, that the baby is listening to what we call is infant directed speech. Sorry. So that would be higher pitches, lower pitches, and also durations and a bit more volume and softness. So that would be what the baby would hear. Baby, 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 baby. So say now that the baby is listening to these, this set of babies, but said in a way that an adult would say. right? So baby, 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 baby. So the baby is not, the actual baby is not actually that interested when there's nothing for them to listen to. So this is a case in which we would have the baby would look at their shoes, they would look at the parent, she would look at anything but not the stimulus. So it's important for the infant to focus on the stimuli. And I'm showing you this because this is where it becomes difficult when you have children and you're trying to bring in more babies. And obviously this is a place in which you can't really do outside of that booth. You have to, you don't get a chance to go into a normal space, and there's a lot of distractions. So we test infants between 6 to 24 months, and we gather, so when we gather data, it is difficult. So, for example, the range of an age, that depends on the task, right? So it could be that an infant would be, the range could be between 4 to 8 weeks, but after that, the child then starts to move forward onto another stage. Eligibility, well, it depends on what type of task, what type of information you want to get, right? So if we need a study with babies that are fully English monolingual, we have to get there. Or we could have a bilingual infant. The age of the child is really important too. We also require families coming to campus, and that's been very difficult. But another difficulty with this is we lead to this ends up as higher socioeconomic status families coming to our lab, which is fantastic, but it would be nice to have a little bit more distribution. And also, parents need things like scheduling and rescheduling, and it makes sense. I mean, we have infants have colds, infants have vaccinations, they have daycares, all sorts of things like the like. Also, I forgot about this one. It's very difficult to recruit. Now, prior to COVID, we had baby trade shows. Baby trade shows are moms, pops, and tots sort of family things. And if you don't know what a baby trade show, it's kind of like a wedding trade show or something like that. And at that time, we would be able to go up to a person and say, would you be interested in that? But because of COVID, no one does anymore. So now we're trying with social media and pamphlets, but the best thing is word of mouth, and that is the biggest thing. Infants are easily distracted. They can fall asleep during a task. They can become very fussy, or there's tantrums because of hunger, baby colds, and things like that. The parent may decide to stop a task at any time, which is normal, because the baby would probably be fussy, right? We may not have, the parents may not have listened to the instructions, or they may distract the infant. And so that becomes a problem with infant studies. The attrition rate in infant speech perception studies is around like 10 to 15% that cannot be used. So due to the infants and study, due to the nature of infants and children, the development labs were closed across the whole, the complete world, right? The whole world, everybody did, right? Everything was shut down due to the pandemic. Some researchers were able to make do using Zoom, using remote methods like sending recordings to families, and online studies. Unfortunately for me and people of my ilk, you can, as you can see how that there's been a lab and how it works and the pitfalls that occur. So my lab was completely shut by that time. And it's just taken to starting to bring them in again, but it's trickled down quite much. So I am grateful to have the online, the SoundsOnline.ca. So I'm hopeful that I can bring more participants to campus since we have the vaccinations are available. And to do this, we need to recruit. And currently, we have a sister of ChIRP and Sounds Online. And we're continuing on trying to gather more families and more participants as we can. So ChIRP is the Child and Infant Research Participation group. And so we would like to connect both the Sounds Online and ChIRP. And we think that given that with a few more online studies, we can start advertising with Sounds Online. So hopefully we'll be able to get a more diverse population of participants coming to the lab. And also, we have to think about universities like the University of Alberta that probably can be a little bit daunting to someone who is unfamiliar. Okay. So now we're getting into Sound Online. This is what it looks like. And if you want to look at it, it is just SoundsOnline.ca. And that's where you're going to find the studies here and other stuff in there. Hopefully we can distribute this over time. I know it will take some time to do so. The Sounds Online is a web portal, so we could actually have different components part of it. We used WordPress to put it together. Again, I'm not a coder, but someone told me how to do it, and it wasn't that hard, so that's good. So anyone who can do it, they could do it through another platform or a similar website. So we have surveys and quizzes. So these are for some anonymous participants, fun tasks. For this, this should be an easy task or a simple study. We have online, and we also have in-person studies. I'm going to show you what it looks like from here. For example, for surveys and quizzes, we put this together just as a simple thing that we didn't gather any data from anybody, but we had we just had a little fun thing to do. We called it "Can You Find the Kiki?" There's a little blurb here. What it kind of looks like here is using WordPress. You can just say, can you find the Kiki? This is a study about sound symbolism, the little blurb here, and this will click to the actual study. So it was quite easy to do. Where it says sign up for a study, we have two options. We have online studies for combining consonants, and I will be talking more about these in the studies section. And we have in-person ones where we have dialects of English. We're looking for babies, looking for Canadian mothers with 18 to 24 months. And just when you go through, you find that you'll get an email to like join the study. So what did we do? We have Sound Online, and we used WordPress to do so. And it was fairly simple. I know that other ones are much better than this, but it works. Also, it works with cognition.run, and we use JS Psych for that. Surely there is more platforms, and if any researcher wants to do that, we could definitely link it to the Sounds Online. Okay. I want to talk about sound symbolism because this is from the surveys and the quizzes. Can you find the Kiki? So we have two shapes. We have the orange one and we have the blue one. So if I were to say to you, which one is the mulo, which one do you think it would be?
I'd say the orange one, maybe.
The orange one, yes, absolutely, right. So this is what we call sound symbolism. It's a phenomenon that we use, that we have first, and I don't think anybody really fully understands. We are trying to analyze these, but it's very difficult to pin it down. If I were to say Kiki, you would probably think that this is the spiky object, right? So we have this study right now and working. If it is through Sound Online, but if you want to just go directly to the cognition.run, it's here. I'll just summarize what this is. So this is a briefing for a participant. Essentially, all languages in the world use words, right? That's clear, right? Most words are arbitrary, right? So so that would mean that if there's a sound and it's linked to an object or reference. For example, the word cat. Whether or not the word cat has the sound k at t, or even spelled as C-A-T, it doesn't have the properties of that shares feline, right? It doesn't mean anything. It just, there's nothing feline-like in their characteristics. But there are exceptions, like the one I just showed you. And another example would be the word meow. So it's very associated to the sound of a cat meowing. Okay, so unfortunately, study 2 doesn't really work through phones, but you can use the laptop and the iPad. And this is what it would look like. Well, not this. You would press it. And debriefing. So at the end of this study, the person itself, it's not going to be a larger thing, but just the participant would have the 42% of the time. We use T, K, and P. For the curvy shapes, you have M, R, and L 50% of the time. These are not the real ones. I would like to have someone to play with it. So I just did that so that you can find that. Okay. Also, if you want code, let us know. There's my name. Where's my email? If you want code, then just talk to me. All right. The second study, we have on combining consonants. This is one of the studies that are in the online part of the Sound Online. So the background here is that we have infants with English learning 9-month-olds. These are from a while ago. This is the data that I had before COVID. What we did is tested the differences. Well, the aim was to determine whether infants could hear the differences between 2 syllables. One is blah and blah, and one is blah and blah, right? So these 2 different groups of infants. Now, before I bring this up, before I bring up the sounds that you may not enjoy, but the in English, we don't have the word or the sound DL at the beginning of a word, right? We can in gloves and blue and things like that, or black or blue. There we go. All right. So so we don't use this in English. So infants would know blah but they wouldn't know blah and blah but they wouldn't know blah. The idea is here is to determine whether infants would detect the blah blah contrast or the blah blah contrast. For your own information, that other languages can use DL at the beginning of a word. So Czech, Polish, Hebrew, and some indigenous languages in Mexico. So you can try it, and we can try it here now. But you may or not, and so you may or may not hear the difference between the 2. Before I start, this is an infant study, and it will be a little bit boring. Okay. So I'll start with group A. Oh.
It's maybe off. There's a button on the left.
It's on.
It's on?
Yeah.
Okay, then the right knob is your volume control.
Sorry.
That's okay. We should have.
Here we go. Wait, maybe I can just actually say it.
Sure.
Okay, hold on. Does this work? No. Okay, that's fine. So it would sound like. Sorry. It would sound like this. Blah 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 blah. That happens for 16 of these syllables. But that's what the babies are listening to. The other one in the group would be blah, 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 blah. I can do that now because I have done it so many times originally. So these would be the sounds that the babies would hear. Oh. Okay. So I'll do this here. So the same place that the babies would be in, camera, monitor, speaker. And so here the baby would hear blah, 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 like I did with before, and then blah, 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 blah. Now, if the baby can hear the differences, they'll be able to hear the difference between blah, blah, blah and blah, blah, blah. Okay. In this case, they actually separated those two things. The babies heard the difference that blah, 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 and then blah, 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 and they realized that they were not the same thing. Group 2 had blah, 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 blah. In that case, we actually had infants that didn't hear the same thing, right? So that they were, they seemed to have the same, no difference between them. So we don't really understand right now why. There's many reasons, but we can talk through this with a Q&A. And of course, these were prior to COVID. So, of course, due to COVID, I needed to figure out the best way to gather data. So I started an adult study with English speakers. Now, instead of 2 groups, we have adults, so we can have participants use to find the contrasts. It would sound something like blah, blee, blah, glee, blah, glee. And also some distractors like sty, spy, try, cry. And so I used the infant study, really changed it into an adult study. And it's easier for this study because they can handle more stimuli, and it's easier to explain it to them. Okay, so if you want to look at Sound Online or just go directly to Cognition, it would be under sign up for a study and on study, online unstudied. And it would look like that. A little bit of a brief. Oh, sorry, I knew it was going to happen. Apologies.
No worries.
I'm surprised we got there not as fast as much as we did. Okay, got it. All right. Nope.
You need to switch in setup slideshow. That's fine.
Slideshow.
In setup slideshow, you need to set it to slides on your secondary monitor.
Primary. Oh, okay. I see. Secondary monitor too.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Then that should work when you do it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Apologies. So here's what you would see. You know, the sounds are the sounds the same or different. So here we would have a glee, and then you could hear glee, and then decide that it's different or same. Now this one I'll just go really quickly. If you are interested with the results, then we can talk about it. But generally, infants at 9 months old did the same thing as the adults did, except for this was known as the different ones, right? And so that's why that is up that way, and the ones that were same were here. So for some reason there is something going on with the GLA and FLA that we're still trying to find about. Again, email me, slarter@UAlberta, and we have the code. All right. So this is the future of SoundsOnline.ca. Currently, we just saw 2 studies. There is one in-person study, but it's just an email that you can send. Hoping for some RAs or grad student who wants to do some of these studies, and hoping to find a sound researcher interested in our project. So, interested in our project? You can send a message to me and look at Sounds Online and other projects. Sorry. So good. Okay. Here. There. Is it okay? Yeah. So other projects here, we have my lab, Little Magpies at U Alberta, and the website that you can find. Also ChIRP, the Child and Infant Research participant. Also, you can contact ChIRP at U Alberta, and it'll be on Facebook. Acknowledgements. Thank you to everyone here and the participants involved. And thank you very much.
Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I have various responses. I found GLA and ZLA to be very hard.
GLA and ZLA?
Yeah.
Yes.
Even though I know
yeah.
and I can hear it, and certainly speaking them is very different.
Right.
But
yes.
when you were doing it, I found it very hard to tell the difference. Even knowing that they were different, it was interesting.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that, because I think what it is. Oh, I'll just do that. Do you mind if I?
Go for it. Yeah, whatever.
I think what it is something about the acoustics and the articulation of duh and gla, right? But I'm still trying to think about it for a bit, so I don't want to ride it. Yeah. But it is really quite interesting. Thank you. I think it is, obviously.
No, for sure.
Right, yeah. So, and it was really good to know that there was, it was very similar to the adults stuff. So I'm going to dig into that a little bit more, for sure.
It's also interesting to me because saying "g" and "duh," you have totally different mouth posture.
Right.
You're not; those aren't in my head similar sounds.
Yeah.
But when you put them with the GLA, it does. Also, GLA immediately sounds like Czech or Polish to me when you say it. It sounds sort of northern Central Eastern Europe.
Do you have background of Polish?
Ukrainian.
Ukrainian.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, but I watch Czech and Polish movies.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So I have some of the sounds in my head.
Yeah. So when you see, actually that's interesting, because when you see ZLA, is that a was that something that you normally would hear, like a VL?
I think in the context of like listening to Czech or Polish, I would probably hear it better than in this context where you're going back and forth.
Yeah, that's surprising. It's not that surprising because this was my speech, right? So I'm sure to not have said Czech something correctly, right? So yeah, I know it's kind of interesting, and I'm still working on what exactly we're doing with this. Yeah.
I mean, I also find it fascinating that it's a cognitive journey to work through the la and gla.
Yeah.
Because as Tom was describing it, it's fascinating that that you're exploring that, and that the children and the adults are having a similar response.
The other thing too is that if you have in another study, it all depends actually on like again the task that you're looking at, the your hypotheses and things like that, because I've done other stuff with TL where infants were not able to hear the difference of that or care about it at all, but would be fine if it was like a PL, right? So so that's I'm kind of quite interested in why why these things are doing it this way, but another thing's happening in this way. So yeah.
And I don't know if we have any questions online, but I have one last question. I've always heard that it's very useful for children to have two language models. And the introduction you gave to your first study about before 6 months or so?
6 months at
the
vowels,
hear the difference, and I find that really intriguing.
Yeah.
And so in utero as well, right?
Yeah.
So if you get both parents singing or speaking to the baby in utero, it probably influences that as you've described, maybe.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's actually quite a lot of words. Or sorry, a lot of things thinking when you're talking about that. So, with the in utero things is they've done studies where moms would be writing or reading to their child, but the baby wouldn't know, right? Obviously, and doesn't know the higher frequencies of like a s or t sound. But they would how the melody works. That's how it starts with that. And so that's why we say, well, not specifically with that, but with the universal speech contrast that they are able to do very early ages, which it's just amazing, right? And but then they do start to focus into their own language, and it's quite interesting to find out what happens. We actually have studied a lot with other stuff as well, thinking about the consonants at the end of a syllable, and that changes everything. So there's a lot of things, there's lots to do for babies,
It's almost like weaving sounds. They're weaving out
sounds.
Yeah.
Actually, it's been heard as pruning.
Pruning.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
I think that's good.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Really
you so
appreciate
much.
it.
Thank you so much.
That was great.
Thank you.
It is a really fascinating study.
Oh, thank you.
So, and Tom, feel free to wrap up. Are we still live? We're still live right now. Yeah. I'll say goodbye to everyone though. Thank you for joining us. I'm curious about helping you network out this site. So, like how to, you're looking for participants?
Yeah, I'm looking for participants, and I also would like people to do research along with me, because it's hard to get a whole bunch of new things in there. And Lindsay